the man behind the blade. No one ever spoke his name aloud, not in the marketplace, not in the church, not even in whispered conversations behind shuttered windows. Yet, every villager knew him. They had seen the shape of him, a tall figure with tired shoulders, standing alone near the edge of the square, where the ground was stained darker than anywhere else. They had heard the sound of his boots, heavy and deliberate, stepping across cobblestone when an execution was ordered. Some had even sworn that when he walked past, the air seemed to grow colder. But still, no one truly knew who he was. And that is where the story begins. Because the life of a medieval executioner was not merely violence, nor cruelty, nor simple duty. It was isolation. It was fear. It was a burden passed through generations. And behind every executioner was a human, a man forced into a role from which he could never escape. This is the story of one of them, a man history has forgotten, a man records barely mention, a man we will call Ulrich of Greymoor, a name never written in any surviving document, but rooted in the lives of countless real executioners whose footsteps shaped the darkest corners of medieval justice. And through his story, we open a window into a world that society preferred to keep hidden. Ulrich's childhood, born into a shadowed profession. Ulrich did not choose his fate. Most medieval executioners didn't. The role was inherited, a profession marked onto a family like a permanent stain. If a father was an executioner, his son almost inevitably became one too. Ulrich's earliest memory was not of a blade. It was of silence. He remembered watching other children run across the village square while he stood beside his father, holding on to the rough fabric of the man's sleeve. As they passed, mothers grabbed their children's arms, pulling them away. No one yelled, no one pointed fingers, but all eyes avoided Ulrich and his father. It was as if they were ghosts. His father once told him, "Our hands do what others cannot. That is why they fear us." As Ulrich grew older, he began to understand the truth behind those words. An executioner did not live with the village. He lived beside it, near enough to perform his grim duty, but always kept at a distance. The executioner's house often stood at the outskirts. Markets refused to sell to them. Churches forced them to sit apart. And villagers avoided their shadows, believing touching them might bring misfortune. Ulrich learned early that he could look, but not speak, observe, but not join, breathe the same air, but never belong.
The weight of the blade. When Ulrich was 12, his father placed a sword in his hands for the first time. Not to kill, he said, but to carry. Because for an executioner, the blade was more than a tool. It was a symbol of authority, of death, of judgment passed from kings and lords. Executioners trained not for glory like knights, nor for survival like soldiers. They trained for precision. A single clean stroke was the goal. Anything less was not only dishonorable, it was cruel. Ulrich practiced alone in a clearing behind the house, swinging at bundles of hay until his arms trembled. Each day his father corrected his stance, adjusted his grip, and taught him how to steady a trembling heart. The boy never asked why he needed to learn. He knew, and the knowledge weighed heavier than the blade. Ulrich's first execution. Ulrich was 17 the first time his father handed him the responsibility. The condemned was a thief, not a murderer, not a traitor, just a man who had stolen a horse during a harsh winter. But in the medieval world, the law was unwavering. As Ulrich stepped into the square, the crowd parted silently, not out of respect, but dread. He felt their eyes pierce him, felt their fear coil around him like smoke. The condemned man's eyes met Ulrich's. He did not look angry. He looked resigned. Ulrich raised the blade. His hands shook, his breath caught. He tried to remember everything his father taught him: balance, angle, calmness. And then, with a single motion that would haunt him for years, he brought the sword down. Afterward, he did not return home immediately. He walked into the woods and sat on a fallen tree until the sun dipped behind the branches. He felt no triumph, no pride, only quiet. A quiet so deep it felt like sinking. That night, Ulrich realized something that all executioners eventually learned. The world needed someone to bear the burden, but the one who bore it was never allowed to set it down. The dual life, feared and needed. Over the following years, Ulrich became the official executioner of Greymoor. His father grew older, eventually stepping back. With his new title came responsibility and an unspoken agreement with society. He must protect them, but he could never be one of them. For truth was, an executioner was more than a headsman. He was also expected to perform every task considered unclean. Handling dead bodies, performing torture under court order, disposing of animal carcasses, policing certain crimes, extracting confessions. This made the executioner both feared and strangely depended upon. People avoided Ulrich in public, but came to him in secret. A farmer once approached him at dusk, asking for help putting down a diseased ox. A widow quietly paid him to bury her stillborn child outside consecrated ground. A merchant slipped him coins to guard his warehouse after thieves broke in. Ulrich did these things not for profit, but because he understood the truth. If he did not do them, no one would.
Alone friendship. For most of his life, Ulrich assumed he would live and die alone. But one day, while repairing the leather straps of his axe, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, hesitant, uncertain. It was Lisa, the daughter of the village healer. She was one of the few who had never avoided him as a child. She had watched him train from a distance, curiosity outweighing fear. "I know what they call you," she said softly, "but I don't believe names make a man." Ulrich did not know how to respond. No one had spoken to him so gently in years. Lisa became the only person who treated him as human, the only one who asked about his day, who shared bread with him without hesitation, who listened. But even she could not erase the wall society built around him. When villagers noticed her spending time near Ulrich's house, whispers began to spread. Her mother pulled her away. Her father warned her. People said an executioner carried misfortune, that friendship with him invited ruin. And Lisa, forced by family pressure, slowly drifted away. Ulrich did not blame her. He blamed the world that shaped them. The trial that changed everything. One winter morning, Ulrich was summoned to carry out a sentence on a man accused of murder. The case seemed straightforward. A body had been found in a barn. A knife lay beside it. A local tanner, Eric, had been discovered fleeing the scene.
The village elders declared him guilty, but as Ulrich prepared for the execution, Eric said something that chilled him. "I didn't kill her. I found her there. Please, you're the only one who will hear me. I know the others have already judged me." Ulrich was not a judge. His duty was to carry out the verdict. But he had learned to see the difference between guilt and despair. And Eric did not sound like a murderer. Ulrich knew speaking out would bring punishment. Executioners were expected to obey, not question. Their opinions were unwelcome. But that night, he approached Lisa's home under cover of darkness. Her family still feared him, but she let him in. Together, they examined the dead girl's belongings, which Lisa had been ordered to cleanse. They discovered something unexpected. The wound on her body did not match the knife found at the scene. It was deeper, cleaner, the mark of a hunting blade. And only one man in the village owned such a weapon. The Reeve, one of the very men who had declared Eric guilty. Ulrich and Lisa knew the truth, but the truth was dangerous. When Ulrich presented his findings publicly, he was accused of overstepping his role. The Reeve denied the charges. Some villagers believed Ulrich was lying to gain sympathy. Others feared challenging authority. But Lisa stood by his side. Her testimony, as the healer's daughter, held weight. Other villagers began admitting they had seen the Reeve arguing with the girl days before. The case unraveled. Eric was freed. The Reeve fled into the forest and was never seen again. It was the first time Ulrich had saved a life instead of taking one, yet afterward he felt no relief. Because the village's gratitude was temporary, suspicion and fear returned quickly. In their eyes, he was still the executioner. Ulrich's legacy. Ulrich continued his work for decades. He perfected the art of the clean stroke. He handled the tasks no one else dared to touch. He protected the village from criminals, disease, and danger. Yet he remained apart, respected in silence, but never embraced openly. When Ulrich died, no funeral was held. Executioners were rarely buried in consecrated ground. But Lisa, now the village healer, placed a small stone marker near the forest clearing where Ulrich used to train. She carved 3 words into it. "He carried us." It was the only tribute an executioner could hope for. Not celebration, not praise, but acknowledgement. Because behind every medieval executioner was a man society forced into darkness so they could live in the light.